This video has been brought to you by my book, A Winner Is You. Check it out in the description below.
Hey guys, Ryan here, and we're broadcasting all the way from the popcorn rocket here in space where nobody can hear you scream for awesome video game memories, and we are here to talk about Resident Evil! Ah yes, the original Resident Evil series, which started on the Sony PlayStation, depicting the stories of Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, and Leon Kennedy, and many more characters as they survive the zombie-infested Raccoon City. And oh man, these games are so scary, man. I hope you enjoy them because, they're kind of scary to talk about. Ah!
Welcome to Awesome Video Game Memories, where we talk about awesome memories about video games. I'm Ryan, and the game we're going to talk about today is Resident Evil. So I remember back in 1996 when I was a freshman in high school, I was reading GamePro magazine and I saw a preview for this game called Resident Evil, where you're in a haunted mansion and you have to kill zombies. And I thought, wow, that looks like the coolest thing ever. But the problem was, I didn't have a PlayStation. Being a poor freshman in high school, going through my emo problems. So it took me another 2 years in 1998, in my junior year of high school, to finally afford a PlayStation, and I actually didn't play this game until July of 1998. The exact month and year Resident Evil takes place. Well, I don't think I played it on the exact day that it took place. Kind of more towards the beginning of the month, but still, that was pretty cool. In July of 1998, I was playing Resident Evil, which took place in July of 1998. Yeah, so I rented the Resident Evil Director's Cut, which had the new Director's Cut version of the game with the extra arrange mode, and I also got the Resident Evil 2 demo disc. So when I went home and put in the Resident Evil Director's Cut in my PlayStation, the intro movie froze. It froze. On the part where it says July 1998, it just froze, so I couldn't watch the intro movie. So because I couldn't exactly watch the intro movie, but don't worry, I'll get to that later, trust me, and deciding between the macho Chris Redfield and the lovely Jill Valentine, I obviously chose Jill Valentine. More like, Jill, will you be my Valentine? Oh. Jill Valentine. The ideal woman for every pre-pubescent boy who had a PlayStation at the time. A woman who could handle a gun, pick locks, and was referenced as a sandwich.
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
Thanks, Barry. So I started the game. The control scheme was very weird. Like what people dub as the tank controls. I was able to play the game up until I saw the zombie eating Kenneth. I killed a zombie, and once I exit the door, the game would freeze. So I ended up renting a defective copy from Hollywood Video, if you remember that place. So I played the Resident Evil 2 demo more, which I will cover in the next video, don't worry. So a couple of months later, my friend lends me the bootleg of Biohazard, the Japanese name of Resident Evil, and so I finally get to see the intro, and my first exposure was, I got a shotgun.
Chris Redfield.
I got a shotgun! So everyone knows the awesomeness of the Resident Evil intro. oozing with awesome mid-90s cheese. So cheesy that you can smell it. Chris Redfield, Barry Burton, Rebecca Chambers, Jill Valentine, and the badass himself, Albert Wesker. Never believe in the lie! Resident Biohazard. Since I wasn't able to play Resident Evil Director's Cut months before, I was able to actually get farther in my friend's bootleg copy of Biohazard up until you had to exit the mansion into the guardhouse and then the game would freeze. So I did not have any luck playing this game until I walked into my local EB Games and I paid $40 for a brand new Resident Evil Director's Cut. So now that I was finally able to play Resident Evil Director's Cut, I finally saw the censored version of the intro. I mean, come on, like, couldn't you do like a reshoot for that? And don't you find it weird that Capcom thinks smoking is bad, but blowing off a zombie's head with a shotgun is okay? I personally would rather have my kids smoking. Yeah, so I confess, I actually beat Resident Evil 2 before I played this game, which I will cover in the next video. But I actually spoiled a lot of this game by reading online, and so I knew what happened to all the characters, but you always know it's a very different experience reading about it and actually playing it. So I wanted to see what happened to all these characters, because I remember in Resident Evil 2 you can see that picture of the STARS team in the office, so I wanted to know what happened to them. And now, and something everybody absolutely loves about this game, I've never heard any bad feedback about it, is the voice acting. The voice acting of the first Resident Evil is one of the most iconic performances ever in a video game.
Wesker!
Wesker!
Hope this is not Chris's blood.
I hope it's not Chris's blood. Barry!
Stop it! Don't open that door!
Stop it! Don't open that door!
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
You almost became a Jill sandwich.
Jill, see if you can find any other clues. I'll be examining this.
See if you can find any clues. I'll be examining this.
Jill, here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
You, the master of unlocking, could totally use this. I totally forgot the line, but I'm sorry.
Oh, Jill, this house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
This house has terrible demons.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Ah, it's the Moonlight Sonata.
It's the Moonlight Sonata. And the most epic performance of them all is Chris Redfield's Oscar-winning performance when Rebecca dies by the hunters. Rebecca! And the Oscar for Best Acting goes to Chris Redfield. Let's give him a hand.
My God!
Yeah, I confess, I had a save point in the game where I can watch Rebecca die over and over again. I am clearly sick in the head.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Someone is a traitor.
someone among us is a traitor. Yeah. I don't know what Capcom was trying to achieve with the acting from this game. I mean, I think they wanted to make it seem like a really cheesy but scary B-horror movie, and I think they definitely succeeded. Wow, with all that out of the way, let's finally get into my personal experience with the gameplay. Well, aside from the very awesome, cheesy voice acting, the thing that people absolutely love about this game which is the highest point of this game, is the atmosphere. Like, the mansion is scary, the music is scary, I mean the sounds are scary. Like, this game was pretty scary. Yeah, so probably everybody's first scare, especially mine, was when after you unlock the door in the art gallery on the right side of the mansion on the bottom floor, when you're running through that yellow looking place with the drawers and stuff, and a dog jumps right through the window, scaring the shit out of you, and like you're like, oh my god, bam, 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 screw that fucking dog. And so I kind of have to confess, when it comes to the Resident Evil games, I am a complete moron when it comes to the puzzles. I mean, I couldn't really solve any of them by myself, so I confess I had to go to GameFAQs to figure out how most of these puzzles were solved. Yeah, so being the complete moron that I was, let's definitely not get started on the painting puzzle. Yeah, so what was really awesome about this game was all the journals and files you can read. Now, I remember playing Biohazard, where all the journals and files were in Japanese, but the voice acting was in English. I was finally happy that I was able to read all these in English. I remember that one guy that was like, yeah, I played poker with that guy and it was cheating, and hey, there was an accident in the lab, and then, itchy, tasty, yummy, yummy. And there's a couple of tragic stories like, I'm turning into a zombie, I'm gonna end my life, farewell my love. A researcher got shot from the mansion when he was trying to leave. And also, the John and Ada. Yeah, and it's also funny, I played Resident Evil 2 first, so I was like, hey, it's the John and Ada thing, yeah! But I was pretty surprised you didn't find out who Umbrella was until the end of the game. Yeah, so what I remember too about the difficulty of the game wasn't like super hard. I mean, most of the zombies could be killed pretty easily with the gun. And I've even used the knife on some of them. I mean, the dogs, could be a problem. But then when you started fighting the bosses like Yon the Snake, the giant spiders down in the caves, and then there was Neptune the Shark down in the basement, down in the guardhouse, and there's Plant 42. That's when it spiked up a little bit in difficulty. But if you had enough ammo, it wasn't really a big problem, especially if you were Jill, because Jill had 8 slots compared to Chris's 6 slots. I mean, I remember with Chris, I kind of had to ditch the regular gun and have the shotgun be my default, so I had to be really conservative with Chris. And also when I got the Magnum, I didn't use the Magnum until I got to the end of the game with Tyrant. Yeah, so I also remember one of the craziest parts of this game. After you beat Plant 42 and you get the helmet key, you go back into the mansion, and then you see a first-person view of something like just and opening the door, and now most of the zombies are replaced with hunters. And holy shit, I hated these guys. Hated these hunter motherfuckers. And they would only be a problem in future Resident Evil games, trust me. And also, when I reached the end of the game where you had to fight Tyrant, I actually couldn't beat him at first, because usually when I killed most of the enemies, I would just stand there and not move because, I had enough ammo, I'm just going to keep shooting them until they die. Tyrant really requires you to move a lot, and I've seen people actually use a knife to beat Tyrant. I mean, that's freaking crazy. But then the second fight with Tyrant was a bit easier because you had a little more room to maneuver, but you really had to move around in order to beat him until Brad was able to drop the rocket launcher. Then you were able to beat him that way. And so I remember when I beat the game with both characters for the first time, my completed time was a bit over 6 to 8 hours, because, even with GameFAQs, I was still kind of a moron when it came to this game. And I do admit there were a couple of puzzles I tried to solve myself before resorting to GameFAQs. I'm like, just fuck it. I'll just go to GameFAQs instead. Yeah, but then again, I got good enough at the game where I could beat the game under 2 hours. I'd get the rocket launcher and the key for the alternate costumes, and oh man, just killing everything with an unlimited rocket launcher was like a dream come true. Yeah, so what's also cool about this game is there's multiple endings depending on who's left alive by the end of the game. The first ending I got with Jill was the one with her and Barry. Barry mentions his family. I also remember with Chris, the first ending I got for him was, I rescued Jill and Rebecca. And also, I did play the game multiple times to get all the different endings. I remember the really sad one when Jill's all alone. Oh my god, I didn't rescue Barry because he was the traitor, but he was only being used by Wesker. I also did play through Arrange mode, where they kind of reconfigure some of the items and the enemies, which was really cool, but I do confess I've only played through it once with Jill in her alternate costume. Maybe one of these days I'll get around to playing it with Chris, but not anytime soon. So, the original Resident Evil, the game that started it all. Does it still hold up by today's standards? Yes and no, but mostly yes. Mostly yes, because it's like, you watch horror movies today, but you still want to check out horror movies of the 80s and 90s. And it's like checking out a cheesy 90s horror movie, which is still very, very entertaining, from its hilarious voice acting to its tank control gameplay, but most importantly, its very, very terrifying atmosphere. I mean, put the voice acting aside, you still have a very scary game with a lot of jump scares. You're scared by the music, by the atmosphere. I mean, it's so hard to replicate this type of game in this type of atmosphere, and the sequels to Resident Evil haven't been able to do that much until Resident Evil 7. Yeah, so where can you get this game? The important question is, where can't you get this game? I mean, you can get it on the PC, which has the uncut intro, but you had to get it on eBay. You can still get the original discs on eBay for pretty cheap on the Saturn and the PlayStation, but I definitely recommend getting the PSN version, which you can also play on the Vita. And there's also the remake, which I will cover in a separate video because the remake is definitely very awesome. So that ends this episode of Awesome Video Game Memories about Resident Evil. Welcome to Awesome Video Game Memories, where we talk about awesome memories about video games. I'm Ryan, and the game we're going to talk about today is Resident Evil 2! So, Resident Evil 2 is my personal favorite game in the first 3 games on the PlayStation, because it took what was great about the first Resident Evil and improved on it in almost every single way. So, like I mentioned in the previous video about the first Resident Evil, when I played the game, it would not work past the part where Kenneth got eaten by the zombie. So I took the game back and rented Resident Evil 2 instead, which luckily for me, it worked perfectly. But before that, I was able to play the Resident Evil 2 demo disc that did come with the Resident Evil Director's Cut, which actually did work, and you were only able to play up to the part where you get up to the police station, into the STARS room, and then you're kind of stopped by Ada. And so I remember when I first played this, I thought the opening movie looked pretty good, like, late 90s PC standards, although I did think Leon looked a bit stiff, and he had a pretty big head. I'm Leon. I have a pretty big head, Claire. And plus, the voice acting wasn't as cheesy as the first one. It was still cheesy, but not that cheesy. It's like the director was like, let's put a little more effort. So I want you to do 2 takes of the line this time. But for the most part, the voice acting was pretty good. I did like Paul Haddad as Leon, although I think Paul Mercier and Matt Mercer were better Leons in the sequels. I really liked Alison Court as Claire, because I recognize her as Jubilee from the X-Men. And we do have the iconic voice of Ada, Sally Cahill, who also reprised Ada's role in Resident Evil 4. So the best thing about this game, which was a huge improvement over the first one, was the flow of the game. Now, in the first one, you had to do a lot of backtracking. I mean, it was very Metroid-ish. Well, in the second game, you do a little backtracking, but not a lot, but it goes in a straight flow, more of a complete flow. You go to the police station, down to the sewer, then you have to go to the lab, rather than spending the entire time in the mansion. I remember early reports of this game saying, the entire game was going to take place in the police station, and to me, I was thinking a police station isn't even as large as a mansion. How could you have an entire game take place in there? And also about this game too was the puzzles were not as hard to solve as the first Resident Evil. Now, the first Resident Evil, I was a huge moron when it came to the puzzles, but actually most of the puzzles in this game were pretty straightforward. I remember that puzzle where you have to push the statues to activate that switch, and it was pretty easy to kind of understand kind of the clues they were giving. Now, if there's one thing I felt the first game did better, it was definitely the setting and the atmosphere. In the first game we had, the scary mansion, ooh, and in the second game, you're in a police station, you're in the sewer, you're in a laboratory. It's not as scary as the first game. There's still a couple of scary moments, but overall, I still felt the first game was definitely a lot scarier. And also, in comparison to the first game, which had a huge repertoire of enemies like zombies, zombie dogs, hunters, chimeras, Resident Evil 2, it had a pretty diverse cast of enemies, but not as big as Resident Evil 1. I still remember, being freaked out by the Licker, which was actually a zombie that mutates further, which is kind of crazy. And then you had those giant plants, and you still had the giant spiders. There wasn't as many bosses in this game as the first one, because I played this game first and the first one later. I was definitely overwhelmed by the whole bunch of bosses in the first game. Really the only big boss is William Birkin, who goes around the game, tormenting you. And then in the B game you had Mr. X, which was, another tyrant. And so one of the things I was really anticipating in this game was the giant alligator in the sewer. I remember spoiling this game on various websites, and they say, you're gonna fight this giant alligator in the sewer. I'm like, holy shit, I can't wait for that battle. But then you just kind of shoot it once after it bites that fire thing, and then it's dead. That's it. I was hoping the big giant alligator battle was gonna be epic, like, Hook versus the alligator in Peter Pan, but nope, that's it. That's okay though. Yeah, and I actually did enjoy the relationship between Leon and Ada for most of the game. It didn't come off too forced, and it actually felt pretty natural, even though most of the writing for the Resident Evil games is usually cheesy, but I do enjoy the relationship between Leon and Ada, and when she got shot by Annette at the end, I actually did feel pretty sad. I'm like, no, Ada! This is what everyone's been dying for. Ugh.
So, this is what everyone's been dying for.
Yeah, Leon, that G-Virus vial could have fallen on a rat and would have created a giant rat monster. Just saying, because, when William Birkin got shot, those rats kind of carried the T-Virus into Raccoon City, if you know what I mean. And also, I remember the fights with William Birkin not being, super hard. Even the end one wasn't really that hard, even at the end of the B game. I actually confess, in, the B game, I thought the fights with Mr. X were definitely very difficult. Oh yeah, I also remember that scene where you're watching the camera and Mr. X looks up at it, smashes it just like that. Like, uh-oh, Mr. X is coming. He's coming to get me. Yeah, so I remember beating Leon's A game pretty easily, and Claire's B game was a bit tougher. It was obviously different. I had Sherry, a bit of rearrangement of the puzzles. There's Brian Irons, who I had to deal with too. But overall, aside from Mr. X, it wasn't really that difficult. And I do confess, it took me a couple of years to finally play Claire A and Leon B, which I heard is actually the canon story for some reason. You actually have William Birkin infecting Sherry with a G-Virus embryo, which is why, in Resident Evil 6, Sherry can actually heal herself. But yeah, it was definitely a very different game than the Claire B game. So I keep wondering to myself, why did I put it off for so long? And also, one of the best things about beating any Resident Evil game is, you get unlimited ammo for, a certain weapon. I remember getting unlimited machine gun ammo, unlimited rocket launcher, but the problem is, if you ended up using them in the B game, that would decrease your game score. So I kind of had to go through Leon A and Claire B over and over again so I can get Hunk. And then I eventually got Tofu, and I was able to actually beat Hunk's mission, but I could never beat Tofu's, and Tofu's mission was really hard because all you had was the knife. So even though Resident Evil 2 wasn't as scary as the first one, Resident Evil 2 is still my personal favorite game out of the first three because it was the first one I finished. I thought the flow of the game was excellent. There wasn't a lot of backtracking, it was still scary, but not like super scary, but just right enough where I wouldn't freak out at night because I know the first one definitely scared me in a lot of places. And also I thought the story was definitely better in 2. Like, you had the relationship with Leon and Ada, then you had Claire and Sherry, and then you had the side characters like Brian Irons, the corrupt individual who was being bribed by Umbrella, and even all the files and stuff you got to read were definitely very interesting to read, although not as memorable as Itchy Tasty. And also it had a lot of cool bonuses like, being able to encounter Brad Vickers as a zombie, and then you had that picture of Rebecca you can develop in the picture room. And my personal favorite was the stars picture and trying to identify everybody, although there were 2 I couldn't identify back in the day until Capcom said, yeah, this is Kevin and Edward Dewey. And also at the time of this recording, I heard Capcom is definitely considering a remake of this game. And oh man, I'm so excited to play it. If it ever gets made. Yeah, so where can you get Resident Evil 2? I mean, it's still pretty cheap to pick up for, the PlayStation, the Dreamcast, and the PC. And the PC also has a battle mode, which is also in the Resident Evil 2 DualShock version. And you can definitely also get this on the PSN store, which I got. And it definitely works on your PS Vita, so you can play this game on the go. And there's also the really expensive GameCube version, which I don't really recommend. Yeah, so that wraps up this episode of Awesome Video Game Memories about Resident Evil 2. Welcome to Awesome Video Game Memories, where we talk about awesome memories about video games. I'm Ryan, and the game we're going to talk about today is Resident Evil 3! Nemesis! Yeah, so I remember back in 1999, there was so much hype building for Resident Evil Code Veronica on the Dreamcast, and I thought that was going to be Resident Evil 3. For some reason, it didn't have the 3 in it. But then I remember this game just kind of came out of nowhere. It felt like, hey, there's a lot of people that don't have Dreamcasts yet, so we'll just kind of throw them a bone, calling it Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Because from what I heard, Sony still had the rights for any numbered Resident Evil series, so they had to call Code Veronica without a number on the Dreamcast. But regardless, I still was pretty excited for this game because it was Resident Evil 3, and you got to play as Jill Valentine. Yeah. So the best part about Resident Evil 3 was definitely the intro, and out of all the PlayStation games, I personally thought this was the best intro of them all. Because you get to see the zombie apocalypse happening in Raccoon City, the zombies overwhelming the people, and that really badass part where the Raccoon City Police Department gets out of their cars, arms their guns, and are ready for battle. After that, you see the Umbrella Corps trying to clean up the mess, but then all hell breaks loose as everyone keeps losing their shit against the zombies, then everybody fucking dies! Holy shit, they did. Of course, I remember at the beginning of the game, you see this guy lock himself in a container, and he's like, no, I don't want to go out, it's much safer in here. But because this game takes place before and after Resident Evil 2, dude, you're gonna fucking die. But you're not gonna die from the explosion, though. Yeah, so, one of the disappointments I had with this game was, Resident Evil 1, you had to do a lot of backtracking. It was very Metroid-ish. Resident Evil 2, you didn't have to do as much backtracking. It had a much smoother flow. In this game, they combined the best and the worst aspects of Resident Evil 1 and 2, where you have to do like a lot of backtracking in the city. And the city is pretty massive. So I tried as much as possible to solve this game without game facts, but it was definitely very tough. And one of the craziest parts about this game was Nemesis. Stars. And this motherfucker was everywhere you went. You're running to this place, Nemesis, and you're low on health. You're trying desperately to get to that next typewriter to save or find a healing item, but then Nemesis comes out and whacks the shit out of you and you're dead. Yeah, so while this game lacked the scares of the first two, Nemesis was definitely there to keep you on your feet. And then we got Carlos.
Calm down, lady. I'm no zombie. My name's Carlos.
Your sidekick for the game, the not love interest of Jill Valentine. And I do remember when Jill gets infected with the T-virus, kind of midway through the game, you're like, no, Jill, please don't die. But don't worry, Carlos comes to her rescue. Yeah, so where I kind of felt Resident Evil 2 was lacking in the enemy department compared to Resident Evil 1, they bring back a lot of crazy creatures in this game, especially the hunters, and there's even a frog hunter in this game. Yeah, I remember the part where Jill gets infected and you're Carlos, and then you're racing through this laboratory hospital place, and you see one of the frog hunters in containment, and then after you get the cure for Jill, you're running back and that fucking frog hunter just jumps out of the containment unit, but luckily you're just able to get in the door and escape. It was that easy. I definitely remember this game being a lot more difficult than Resident Evil 1 and 2 because of Nemesis. Yeah, that motherfucker would just kind of appear anywhere like I mentioned before, but luckily the last battle with Nemesis wasn't really that difficult.
You want stars? I'll give you stars.
But unfortunately we don't get to see Carlos again, which kind of sucks. And also one of the coolest thing is this game had the first iteration of mercenaries. One of my personal favorite things in any Resident Evil game was the mercenaries mode, where you just kill enemies, but this one wasn't as refined since it was obviously the first one. You had to kill enemies to get time and then run back and get money. I wasn't very good at this, to be honest. I didn't really bother getting any of the alternate costumes or unlimited ammo in this game because I just wasn't really the biggest fan of this game, even though I'm totally a big fan of Jill for obvious reasons. But Resident Evil 3 just kind of felt like a game that was made just for the hell of it for PlayStation owners who didn't have a Dreamcast. Yeah, so one of the criticisms about this game was that Resident Evil 3 really felt like a side story, more like fan service for Jill fans. I'm a huge fan of Jill, obviously, but I didn't really think they really needed to make this game. I was hoping Code Veronica was going to be the real Part 3, and to me it still is the real Part 3, but because of the licensing rights between Sega and Sony at the time, Yeah, actually what's cool about this game, if you beat the game, you get to unlock these epilogues, but the problem is I didn't bother replaying the game again, so there was an EGM magazine that did have all the epilogues, and then you can just go online and see what the epilogues look like, or just download a game save for your PS3 and see them from there. Yeah, so Resident Evil 3, I know it came out for the Dreamcast. I also think it came out for the PC and the PlayStation, obviously. But you can definitely pick this game up on the PSN store for less than $10 and play it on your Vita on the go. Welcome to Awesome Video Game Memories, where we talk about awesome memories about video games. I'm Ryan, and the game we're talking about today is Resident Evil Code Veronica. Yeah, so I remember back in 1999, this game was getting a lot of hype online and in magazines, completely overshadowing Resident Evil 3. I also remember thinking that Code Veronica was actually going to be Resident Evil 3 because we barely got any Resident Evil 3 coverage, or maybe even none at all, because Resident Evil 3 just kind of popped out of nowhere. So when Resident Evil 3 was released, I was like, wait a minute. So Code Veronica isn't Resident Evil 3 or not Resident Evil 4? What's going on? And then later we learned that Sony had exclusive rights to the main Resident Evil series, which are the numbered ones, and then the spin-offs had to be on other systems. But personally, I do think Code Veronica is the real sequel to Resident Evil 2, while Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is kind of more of a fan game. Well, or more of a fan service game where you get to play as fan favorite Jill Valentine. Yeah, so I remember in late 1999 or early 2000, when I was at Funko Land before it became GameStop, they were showing a Dreamcast promo tape on the TV screens there, and they were showing the beginning of Resident Evil Code Veronica, where Claire runs away from the Umbrella helicopters, obviously not getting shot, and then after that she gets trapped by all those guys, and then she drops her gun, shoots the barrels in this badass Matrix type fashion, because the Matrix was the big movie of that year, and then she gets caught by Rodrigo Juan Raval, and then the tape stops and shows Resident Evil Code Veronica coming in 2000. So being a really poor college student at that time, I was renting a room kind of close to my campus, and I was working part-time at my campus. I couldn't afford a Dreamcast on September 9, 1999 because I couldn't find it anywhere. Yeah, I remember trying to look for a Dreamcast, and I couldn't get it anywhere. By the time this game came out in February 2000, I still couldn't afford it. So I couldn't afford it till a month later in March 2000. I was saving up money, and my parents would be pretty cool and send me an extra $200 a month for food and stuff. And I kind of spent that $200 on my Dreamcast and Code Veronica. So thanks, Mom and Dad. Yeah, so I didn't really look up a lot of information about this game when it first came out because, I didn't want any spoilers. But then I remember opening up the game and then seeing, hey, Chris is back. Oh my God, Chris is back. Yes, Chris Redfield is back. He's got a shotgun. So I remember in March 2000, I set up my Dreamcast. I put the game in. Then watching that teaser movie, I was like, holy shit, is Albert Wesker back? And what's with his eyes? Holy shit, Wesker's back. I thought he died in the first one. So I already talked about the super awesome movie-like intro, and then I remember being freed by Rodrigo. He's like, fuck it, you're free to go. But there's zombies. There's zombies everywhere. I was like, okay. And so I go upstairs. I'm like, oh, fuck. This is a graveyard. This is a Resident Evil game. And zombies are probably going to come out of the graves. And holy shit, was I right. And what was cool? The background wasn't static this time. It moved along with me. Even though there were still the tank controls. Now, people have mixed opinions on this character, Mr. Steve Burnside. He definitely annoyed the hell out of me at first with his super annoying voice.
He won't come. You'll just end up disappointed if you rely on others. Don't worry, Claire. Your knight in shining armor is here.
Yes!
Yes! Shut up.
I gotta admit, he did kind of grow on me as the game progressed, especially up until, his demise. I kind of felt a little emotion there.
You're warm.
Steve! Of course, I remember going to that cabin and seeing the dogs drag that dead body under. Oh god. Yeah, this is gonna be pretty fucking scary. Ooh. Now, like I mentioned in the first Resident Evil video, I am a complete moron when it comes to solving the puzzles of Resident Evil. And back when I was playing it, there wasn't a lot of good guides on this game yet, so I had to solve a lot of this on my own. And it sucked. It sucked a lot. But eventually, I prevailed. But man, I really sucked at the puzzles in Code Veronica. Really, really bad. And also, one thing I didn't like about Code Veronica was, now Resident Evil 2 had a really good flow to it where you didn't have to do a lot of backtracking, but in Resident Evil 1 and 3 you had to do a lot of backtracking. The backtracking is a lot worse in Code Veronica. Like, you have to go like all the way here, then all the way here. I mean, I gotta go all the way here to get Rodrigo his painkillers, and I gotta go all the way back to the beginning, and just going back and forth, back and forth. Yeah, this game, I got stuck at a lot of points too. Yeah, the backtracking in this game was pretty awful in my opinion. I mean, some of you might disagree with me, but yeah, Way too much backtracking in this game. I also remember being really freaked out at the part where the scientist is banging on the window. Hey, help, you gotta free me! Oh shit, I'm dead! Oh yeah, of course, it's a Resident Evil game. He's gonna die. And also with Resident Evil Code Veronica, we got a lot of new baddies. Like we got, the mutated salamander and my least favorite enemy, the Bandersnatch. Oh, I hated these goopy yellow dudes with the long arms. Like, oh god, I hated these guys, especially in battle mode. So I did feel kind of sad for Steve when he had to kill his father, because his father sold Umbrella Secrets. I mean, you sell Umbrella Secrets to the highest bidder, yeah, you're gonna be put on Rockford Island and turned into a zombie. And then we have Alfred Ashford. Now I remember this guy was like, he's weird, very weird.
I am Alfred Ashford, commander of this base.
Oh? You must be one of Umbrella's lower level officers if you're in command of a backwater base like this one.
And he's even weirder when I found out he's a crossdresser.
We meet each other at last. A pity I must say goodbye so soon. I am Alexia Ashford.
What? No!
Wait a second. What just happened?
So there never was an Alexia after all.
You mean he thinks he's two people? Okay, that's it. Let's get out of here.
Okay, Alfred, I got nothing against, what you do on your spare time, but, your sister is in the Antarctic, so, you don't have to dress up as her. Alfred? And one of the most difficult parts of this game that I remember very, very well was the fight with Tyrant on the plane. Holy shit, did I have a very difficult time beating Tyrant. I remember pushing that button which sends the crate towards him, but then he doesn't fly out, and then you have to shoot him, and then you have to wait for the spring mechanism to get back into order, so you gotta wait before you can push the button again to launch him out. And I died at this part a lot. A lot. And then I remember going into the Antarctic with no weapons whatsoever because I wasted them on the Tyrant on the plane. Fuck that guy. And then Disc 2 begins, and you play as Chris Redfield wearing a STARS jacket. Chris, Raccoon City blew up a couple of months ago, and I don't think the STARS exists anymore. There's this little organization called the BSAA. I think you might want to look into them. Yeah, I remember having trouble with that giant worm at first, and then it swallowed poor Rodrigo. Rodrigo was cool. He helped out Claire, and then he dies and he's reunited with his family. Thank you, Rodrigo. You're awesome. And then, one of my least favorite enemies, besides the Bandersnatchers in this game, make a return, and those are the motherfucking hunters. The hunters which I hated in parts 1 and 3. And oh boy, do they come back in this game. Fuck those guys. And then I remember, the badass himself returns. Albert motherfucking Wesker! And of course, this is the game where Albert Wesker has a more royal villainish voice. Chris, I hate you so much.
You have no idea how much I hate you.
Alexia?
Alexia?
The T Veronica virus.
I want it. Now.
When Wesker used to sound like this.
Stop it! Don't open that door!
Stop it! Don't open that door! And then when I saw when Chris punched Wesker's sunglasses off and he had those cat eyes, I remember like a lot of the message boards of Resident Evil saying like, oh my god, Wesker's so cute, he has kitty eyes now. And then I also remember the giant salamander swimming around in that lake with that item you need to get. I kind of forget what it is, but you'll see it in the footage. I sure as hell did not go inside that water. I was like, you know what, dude, I'm just gonna shoot you with my shotgun right outside the water where it's safe. So fuck you, giant salamander creature thingamabobber. And then, back in the Antarctic, I remember fighting Nosferatu, Alfred and Alexia's father, which they inject with the T Veronica virus. He was like, my open heart's outside, you must shoot me with the sniper rifle. And then the most tragic part of the game, where Claire has to free Steve from captivity. And then he mentions He was experimented on by Alexia, who came back to life, and Alfred died. Alexia experiments on Steve, then Steve turns into the big hulking monster! Holy shit, I died on this part a lot of times. And I gave Claire all the good ammo, and I still had a lot of trouble with it, but eventually I was able to prevail. And then I saw Steve, de-transforming. He's like, Claire, I love you, and I've only known you for like a day. Well, I'm gonna die anyway, so I might as well just let it all out.
Steve?
No, Steve!
And now, this is kind of a funny part. I remember when I switched back to Chris, I did not have enough ammo to beat Alexia, because I literally left it all with Claire. And I didn't have another game save because back then I never kept multiple game saves because I am an idiot. Like I am with solving the puzzles in this game. So no matter how hard I tried, I even tried to beat Alexia with the knife, I had to restart the whole game. Jesus, and that sucked. Sucked so bad. But luckily at the time, there was a guide on GameFAQs I was able to use to blaze through it. I made sure I left Chris with the good ammo, and I was finally able to beat it. I got the linear launcher, then I was able to play battle mode. And battle mode was actually pretty fun. I beat it with all the characters except Wesker. I got really close to the end with Wesker in first person mode, no doubt. Yeah, so Resident Evil Code Veronica is the game I truly consider the sequel to Resident Evil 2, because 3 kind of came out of nowhere, and like I said earlier, it was more of a fan service game for fans than Jill, and I think the true story continues in Code Veronica. Like, you can kind of skip Resident Evil 3 and still play Code Veronica and not really miss out on anything. Well, if there's things I kind of dislike about Code Veronica, I mean, it's still scary, but not as scary as 1 or 2, and there's just way too much backtracking. And Rockford Island and the Antarctic are really large areas, and having to backtrack between those areas is really annoying in my opinion. And at least after this game, they totally fixed that problem starting from Resident Evil 4, which I will get to in the next video. Ooh, I can't wait. But overall, Resident Evil Code Veronica is a very solid game which does continue the story. It sets in place a lot of stuff that happens in the later sequels of the game. You can get the Dreamcast version of this game still for really cheap. And there was also a Resident Evil Code Veronica X that was released on PlayStation 2, which I also played, which has extra scenes with Wesker. There's a scene where Wesker encounters Claire. There's also a scene where, before the end, where Wesker takes Steve's body and then Chris fights him saying like, "This is for all my comrades, you sunglasses bastard! Ugh!" And also a couple years back, Capcom released an HD version of Code Veronica X, which I definitely recommend getting. Yeah, so that wraps up this episode of Awesome Video Game Memories about Resident Evil Code Veronica. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure to check out these other videos, and also make sure to follow me on social media and check out the official Battle Geek Plus website. Take care.